can take our love much farther somewhere far beyond something we ever see. It's a game of trust in action. I believe in a love that's afraid of nothing.
Hey everyone, welcome to the newest episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. Today's guest was recommended to me by a previous On That Note guest, Ryan Egan. He's an indie soul electronic funk singer-songwriter who splits his time living in Atlanta, Georgia, and Paris, France. You need to go listen to his debut album out right now called Shadowdancer. But before we get the episode started, please make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And don't forget to follow me at Parker Whirling and at onthatnote_podcast on Instagram. And on that note, please welcome Desmond Myers. I'm sitting here with Desmond Myers, an indie soul electronic funk singer-songwriter based in Atlanta, Georgia, and Paris, France. Congratulations on your new album, debut album, Shadowdancer, out right now. Came out October 8th. It's so funky, and there's all these beautiful synths, and I love all of your catchy vocal lines. I'd usually like to start out by asking about the writing and recording process, but I had one particular question that came to me when I learned that you were in Paris as well as Atlanta, my hometown. But I wanted to know what the pros and cons are of splitting your time living in completely different parts of the world, and if there are any notable differences between like the French music scene and the American music scene.
Oh, wow. Well, already a really big topic of my life. So first of all, it's cool that you're in Atlanta too. I'll have to catch up on that more later.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, to answer your first question, definitely like kind of splitting my time between both places presents its own challenges. I try to focus on the advantages, but it's, I wake up every morning with about 400 notifications from everybody in the team over there because they're obviously 6 hours ahead of me. I have a family here in Atlanta, and so it's hard I try to limit the amount of time I spend away from them and stuff like that. But I'm also just grateful because I lived in France for about 5 years. I lived in Europe for about 10 years in total. And when my wife and I left Europe, I had played music over there. I had toured in bands and stuff, and we were kind of worried that we had kind of closed the door, that we weren't going to have a chance to come back. And luckily, that's not been the case. I've been able to come back, so I'm grateful to be able to travel with what I do. It's really travel is something I enjoy, and it's something that I feel really lucky to be able to do. So yeah, it's definitely a thing to juggle, and keeping two worlds, with gigs here and gigs there, and keeping everything afloat is definitely an organizational thing that I feel like I'm getting better at. But it definitely took some time. But I would say it's like all opportunities, it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, I'm sure it is a lot to juggle, literally going from the South, the American South, to
Right.
a completely different environment and culture over in Paris. What got you started going over there? I know you met a German producer when you were like 17 and he brought you over there. What was that like when you first went out to Europe?
100%. Yeah, that's exactly how it happened. So I'm from North Carolina originally, so not too far from Atlanta. I'm from near Charlotte, and I was always gigging in high school and playing guitar in a couple of bands and writing my own stuff, restaurant gigs, the whole nine yards. And but I was like, even when I was in high school, I was gigging like a lot of the nights of the week already. And so I would play at this club, the Evening Muse, which is a fantastic venue in Charlotte. And I would always meet people, and I met Nicholas, this German producer who wanted to start a record label. And it was right around the time when I was graduating high school, and I was either going to go to like a small community college and study jazz guitar, which would have been fantastic, but nobody in my family had ever traveled. I grew up on a farm, like a bull farm, and we just never traveled. And I think my parents were I'm the youngest, and they were kind of excited about the idea of having one of their sons travel overseas. and they knew I wanted to do music. I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and it was kind of like, well, let's just do this, right? And when I got over there, I kind of realized I was stuck because like you go over there and you need to work. So in order to work, you need a visa. In order to get the visa, you need to show that you can have a place to live. And suddenly you've got yourself set up to live somewhere, and you need to like make that happen. And so it kind of like, it was kind of this adventure, really, really truly like an adventure. When you're 18, you're able to do shit like that. Oh, sorry. Can I swear?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Sorry. I'll limit it.
No, it's cool. It's no worries at all.
Okay. Very great. Yeah. You're able to do stuff like that when you're younger. So, yeah, that's how I ended up over there. And then just kind of gigging around. I mean, you're a musician, the whole 9 yards, and eventually ended up in Paris. And that was, I loved Germany. I got to see a lot of Germany, but, actually being in, when I arrived in Paris, I was like, wow, this is really like cool. This is really like where I wanted to be. So ended up moving there.
So couple questions. One being more what I would typically ask, which is like, what did you learn from working with this guy, Nicholas? And was it kind of a mentorship? What kind of lessons did you get out of meeting him and working with him? And then the other was, when you met him and he asked about if you wanted to come to Germany with him, were there any like red flags at all? Like, was that sketchy at all? Or did he do the research?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I feel like I have to include that part of the story that like, he's a very trustworthy guy. He, met my parents. Obviously I was a child kind of at this time, not child,
Yeah.
like young. And he had worked in the music industry actually for a while. He had produced several bands in the US actually. He had come from Germany to the US and there was a band called the Paper Tongues that he was really involved with, and they had quite a few success. They charted on Billboard pretty high a couple of times and stuff. So he had, like credentials.
Yeah, he had a track record.
He had a track record. He had a great studio in Charlotte that we did a little EP that I like handed out to my friends in high school with. And that was super fun. Like I remember hearing those first demos. I was just like so blown away. It was like my first just like cool sounding recording, And so no, he was a very, very trustworthy dude. And I learned a lot. He's fantastic, like producer, super creative, super fantastic songwriter, and he's still doing music. So yeah, Nicholas Balahandran is his name. He's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to check him out. Check out his own music.
For sure. He's actually moved back he's in LA now. So he's like,
oh, cool.
He's doing the Europe US thing too. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, what did you learn from working with him on that first EP? I mean, that's always a big moment for artists when you hear your first thing recorded back and you're like, holy shit, like this sounds like the real deal. So from that, and maybe just in the future working with him, what were some really big lessons or takeaways you got?
This is a great question. I think like looking back, artists, we can be pretty self-critical of things that we did when we were younger. And I think looking back, I was still really green. I was still like really learning the art of writing songs. I've been writing songs for years, but playing your songs out at an open mic or at a coffee shop is really different than putting them down to record. And so what I learned there was structuring my songs, just how to just get weird. Like we got really weird. We experimented a lot with like melodica. He introduced me to like the melodica, this, like the piano you blow into, and just being really creative. Tons of like messing with, I'd never recorded in a DAW before, so that was like a DAW, like learning about that kind of stuff. And it was really like my first kind of thing, and just set me off on a path and to learning this this industry. But yeah, it was like, I would say that I as an artist was really, really green at that point. I was still like kind of figuring out. I'm not one of those artists. I feel like I feel like everybody shares this maybe anxiety as you get older, but there's like these 18 or 19-year-old or 20-year-old artists who come out of the gate with a sound. And I don't think that's the path for me. I think like I've met so many people who've influenced my sound, especially in Paris. Like I really, really learned a lot about what I like in Paris, and learned so much about recording and their approach to music over there. I think that it's like have built up to something over the years.
Yeah, and that's something that should be acknowledged and celebrated, because I think a lot of people, when they do hear about people who are 18, 19, even younger sometimes, and they become like pop stars out of nowhere and they get huge and they have their own sound, it can be really discouraging because you feel like that's what you should be doing. But the reality is that's like, 0.1% of all the singers or artists out there. And sometimes people either are really talented or they have a great team. And I think usually it's both. And that's why they're getting so big. But unfortunately, not everyone is like that. But the good thing is you will go through that journey if you keep pushing forward, instead of letting yourself get too discouraged and being like, well, what's the point? I'm just going to quit. But if you keep going and you keep an open mindset and are always constantly trying to learn about what you like, what you don't like, and what's working, what doesn't work, eventually you'll get to a point where it's almost I don't want to say effortless, because then once you hit that point, you'll hit a wall and you'll have to figure it out all again. But it's just a cycle. Like, it's an up and down cycle.
I think also like our culture, we have like a infatuation with youth, especially like here in the West. Like I know like in Eastern cultures, it's a little bit their kind of view on that is flipped, and I think we really really fetishize youth, and also like I'll say like the artists who come out with that sound when they're so young, they deserve everything that they get. Like I was just listening to Phineas's record last night, and and then I like went to because he released that like 3 months after Billie Eilish's record, and so I went back and listened to hers afterwards, and I was just like, it's freaking amazing. It's like fantastic, and so it's totally deserved, but it's like you said, it's not everybody's path, and there's so many, life is like so much longer than these like 11 years that we give people a shelf life sometimes in the music industry, and so yeah, it's just I think, and also to respond to something you said, I think is really important, is just keep it going. Someone told me that really early on, just like there was a band in Germany that I met with, and they were like, at that point they had like 3,000 followers on Facebook, and I was like, oh my god, like that is the they must be rich. I literally thought that. I thought like they're all, dude, like they must like be able to pay their rent with that. And Facebook doesn't pay your rent. Like,
No.
like that, like having 3,000 followers does not guarantee anything. But at that point, I saw them, and I remember talking to them like, how does that feel? And they're like, well, now I want 10,000. And then when I want 10,000, I'm going to want 20,000. And I was really grateful for them to like break it. Like they were like super chill about like, hey man, this is not reality. Like what counts is that you keep doing the job, you keep showing up for the job, and you constantly get better. So I that's come true. That's been true for me. I'm sure it's been true for you. And it's just about showing up and really loving it. Always checking yourself, making sure you're doing it in a way that you love it, which is it's really not always easy, but yeah.
No, it's not always easy, because you'll get distracted by those things like the numbers and, the comments and whatever. And, back to what you were saying about fetishizing youth, I think as a culture, we also fetishize getting things immediately and not having to, be patient and wait for the right things to come, so that, when they do come later on, maybe you weren't ready for it, or maybe you weren't like prepared. Like I wish I was more patient, and it is a daily thing. It's not like, oh, you're patient for a day, and then the next day you're like, you go scroll on Instagram, you see all these people who have more followers or more listens or whatever, and you just start doubting yourself and asking all these questions about why you aren't good enough. And I think as long as you at least are on an upward trajectory, that's all you can do, because you'll go up and you'll go down over the hours, the minutes, the days, but if over the years it's an upward trajectory, that's really all you can ask for, I think.
And not to always use Billie Eilish as the example, I feel like people do that a lot, but you listen to like that record, and kind of responding to what you're saying about like, you know, wanting to be ready when those things come, and even talking about my first record that I was talking about with Nicholas, which, you know, reading between the lines of what I'm saying, I really don't think that I was like super ready, right, to make a record at that point. And she obviously isn't. But when you listen to like what the record's about, she's like, this sucks. Like, she's like, I hate this. That's what she's saying. Like every song is just like, it's like an anti-album in a way. I think it's beautiful. And I don't want her to be unhappy. I feel like she deserves all the happiness and success in the world. I'm not like trying to find some weird enjoyment in her misery or anything at all. Like, that sucks. But there is like something to be taken from that. Like when we, as musicians, just overemphasize all of that.
Because then you get what you want, and it's like not even close to what you expected it to be.
Yeah, and there's just, life is happening right now, and there's so many different things that you can enjoy, and it's not about what we tend to make it about.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd love to shift this over to your new album, because I listened to it a couple of times, and it really is like, it's so funky, it's so dancey, but the lyrics are like pretty personal to you. I'd love to know about the writing and recording process behind these songs. Did you take a different approach compared to your previous releases, like your Brothers and Fathers EP?
Yeah, that's actually a really, really fascinating question. So I definitely took a different approach, and that actually has a lot to do with a previous guest that you had on, a close friend of mine, Ryan Egan, who's also a fellow American in Paris. Like, we have so many commonalities in that way. But he invited me, I don't know if he talked about this with you, but he invited me into a songwriter circle. And that was huge for me. So what we did is we had it's kind of an underground thing. So I don't know if I'm supposed to divulge all the secrets, but it was like, we had a private SoundCloud, and we uploaded a track every Thursday, and it was like super hardcore deadline. Like, you had to have a new track every Thursday. And there was like this cult vibe about it, and which is really fun. But that was amazing, because as life goes on, one thing I realized was I stopped, and I'm just going to make sure that I'm recording. I'm like paranoid here. But I realized that I stopped like making time to be creative, and finding that excuse to schedule creativity was huge for me, to making sure that I was doing a creative output. And so I did that for about 2.5 years with Ryan. And so, you end up with a couple hundred songs, and they're not all good, but you start to like, writing started to become this thing of, it became homework. But every time I would sit down to do homework, I would still have something to say. Like, you would still go into that same room. You were just scheduling time. It's like literally scheduling time to go to this one room in your heart or in your brain and find out what's going on in there. It was really therapeutic to do that, and it helped the album. Like, instead of saying, okay, I've got these 11 songs, and these are the songs, and this is what I have, and this is what I'm going to put out. It was more like, okay, I've got all these other songs, and this week, I've always wanted to try a song in this style, and it didn't work. And then now I've got all these different flavors and these different songs, and I can just really pick the best. And it helped. It was kind of like working out, like working out a muscle, like songwriting wise. So that was, to answer your question, that was a huge part of the writing process. And, I think the thing that I discovered through that, and what really influenced this record and the things that I was talking about, was I realized that the more personal I got, the better the result was. Like, it was this weird thing where I'm talking about things on this record, and sometimes in a coded way, because maybe that's my personality, but I'm talking about things that I never thought I would talk about on a record before. And I realized that those were the moments that I was able to like make something happen. Whereas before, if I tried to sugarcoat something, or if I tried to change how I was really feeling, it just ended up being vapid. So I had like a kind of a motto when I was writing this album, and it was "Go where it hurts." And it was actually in French, "Allez là où ça fait mal," and just go where it hurts. And that guided a lot of the writing process.
So was that difficult for you to get to that place did it take a while to get there? And then when you did, what was that feeling like when you first hit that nerve?
That's a really good question. I think like it always starts with a song. You know, there's you. I think like you always, yeah, you probably know this too. Like a certain project, you write a certain song, you're like, this is like the guidepost for this project. We've established something here, and I think the first single that I put out and the first track of the album is a song called "Playing with Fire," and that one was about some stuff that was pretty intimate to my personal life. And when I heard kind of the way that I was singing about these things, and when I heard how it married the music, I realized, okay, this works. And I was kind of bummed in a way because it was like, okay, so you have to just basically go through your closet for everyone to see it, and then market yourself like, hey everybody, this is what makes me feel weird, or this is what makes me feel anxious, and this is and I don't want to give people the impression that it's like an anxiety ridden album or anything, but it's, you know, I just realized that people, and I do this too as a music fan, and you do this too, like when you love a record, you love it because you identify with it, because the artist was honest with you about how they were feeling. And I may not be the most eloquent, you know, I'm not Neil Young or anybody, but I try to at least be honest about like how I'm feeling, and trying to get to something real and personal. And that was just intensely rewarding, actually, in a scary kind of way.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because that was a huge thing I learned this year. I've written and released a handful of songs over the last 2 or 3 years that I still enjoy and still like appreciate that I did them. But the lyrics were more like, I still appreciate them, but they were more general, things I believed, but weren't personal to things that either happened to me or experiences that I went through. And then I remember recording something that was a lot more like personal to something that happened and someone who was in my life, and hearing it back, and I was like, oh man, this is, it sucks, because now like people are gonna have to hear me really talk about something that's very personal to me, but at the same time, it sounds so much cooler. Like it feels more honest and real. And on the flip side of that is it is scary for people to listen to that. And sometimes you don't even realize it until you're about to put it out. And then you're like, oh shit, people are actually gonna like think whatever they think, and you can't control what they think. Like, so you might as well just write what really feels personal to you. But that's not easy, because you have to admit some things to yourself when you do that.
I completely like identify with everything you just said, like about the, when you said it sucks, when you heard, like when you look back and listen, you're like, oh shit, like I have to
Yeah.
I have to go there, you know,
Yeah.
I have to do this thing.
Because then now you know what it's, now you know how it sounds, like how good it sounds to do that, and you're like, I can't go back now. But that means the road's just gonna be harder.
Yes, but it's, you know, it's again like you're doing the thing that that every artist that you admire has done for you, has paved the road for you, you know. And I want to like, I want to say too, like it doesn't have to be suffering necessarily. Like I think there's this, that's sometimes like a false thing, right? It's like, oh, you have to suffer to write art. It's like, no, you have to be real, and we get really honest and vulnerable when we share, because we get so caught up in, I think like sometimes I would write, but I think before I figured this whole thing out, I would write songs almost like trying to put my best foot forward for the world, because that's what we're trained to do. We're trained to make an impression on people and to make a good first impression, and that's not what we're here. Like when you put headphones on and you go into an album, you're going into this little room with this person. It's super intimate, and you don't want to be intimate with someone with under like false pretenses. That's like a paradox, right? And yeah, you have to turn off that thing that you've learned all throughout school that you have to present yourself in a certain way and be presentable. Like, I'll be super honest. The people, I don't know if they're going to hear this, but like the people who I'm the most worried about hearing my music is, my family. I think like family is like a big one, especially like my in-laws. Cause I'm like, holy shit. Like, my family has to love me. They can think what they want. Like, but like these people are like, what? Excuse me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It is, yeah, it's hard to get, same thing, yeah. Like, I'll show that stuff to my parents, and I'm nervous, but you're right. They're going to love me no matter what. It's the people that are closely related to you, but aren't, like, as, that connection isn't as strong that you're like, oh, is this going to upset someone?
yeah, 100%. And I think I like with my family too, because I used to be really worried about my family listening to my music, and like, no shade on my family, but like almost no one's like really reached out like since the record as like, I mean, I don't want to say it like that. Like, obviously, like people have like congratulated me and stuff, but no one's been like, I would feel really uncomfortable. This is what I'm trying to say. I would feel really uncomfortable if like my brother was in like on texting me like, so that song Shadows, like, what were you meaning by this line? And what was the, I was like, no, just, let's all pretend like, like I don't, like this doesn't exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That is interesting, because when you do write songs that make people be like, are you okay, man? It's like, in a way, you don't you want people to care in that way, but also you want them to understand. And this isn't, I'm not speaking for everyone, but for me, that would be like, no, writing this, recording this, producing it makes me feel better, even though the lyrics and the content might be more like upsetting. It's like going through it makes me feel better, and I can look at it from more of like a top-down perspective instead of having to just hold it in,
100%. Like one of the words that we also used when we were talking about like the trying to choose the track list for this album was like exorcism and confessional. I'm not Catholic. No, I don't want to appropriate the Catholic faith, but but yeah, like, I think that idea of like confessing and purging something that you have on your mind, I think there's a natural process. I mean, we see that reflected in the natural world, right? That's just a thing that we do. And so I think that was like another term, was like just getting it out in the open. I mean, there's so many things, just talking about things. And even, not to always go back to that Billie Eilish record, but it's just like super front of mind. But like, you could take that record on at a certain face value, and as a fan, like let's say you like someone who supported her and went to see her in concert, and then you hear this record where she's talking about how much she really hates the attention that you're giving her. And it's not, but you have to understand, it's not necessarily you. I don't want to speak again in Billie Eilish's place, obviously, but like, it's not you. It's important. It levels the playing field. It actually makes you understand the artist more, right? And then the artist is supposed to be an avatar for you. Like when you listen to an album, the artist is really supposed to be your everyman, and you're supposed to be able to identify with them. So even if I don't know what it feels like to have paparazzi flashing on me all the time and then telling them not to stop, telling them to stop and them not stopping, like she explains in that one song, I can identify that with that on a certain level, and I appreciate the honesty, because what else would she go into the studio and talk about? How many pop stars do we know who live that and then go into the studio and sing about something else? It makes you question, are they being honest? And I think that just helps us all get down to an even playing field, and again, just to be more intimate and real.
Yeah, it humanizes someone who you look up to maybe as an idol or somebody that's more than human, and it brings them back down to earth for you to feel like, oh, they're just like me in a way. I could do that too. If you want to take it that way, like that's what inspires me, is the idea of my heroes being, having to deal with not the same shit I go through, but similar feelings about things, and like going through tough times, or having, great moments in their life and appreciating them. And that's why I love doing these interviews, because I get to talk with people whose music I really, really enjoy and appreciate. And I look up to them in many different ways, even before I've met them. And then to have these conversations and be like, oh, wow, there's so much that we can relate to.
100%. And man, thank you so much for like providing something like this. This is like, I have like a ton of questions I want to ask you. Like maybe I don't want to bombard you, but this is a really cool thing. And I think it's important for artists to do things like this. That I think like one thing I really like about what you do with this is, it's hard sometimes when you're promoting your own music to feel like you're giving value to other people, because you're asking people to give you value in a way, which it shouldn't feel that way, because as we've established, music should be like something that you're offering someone that they can also enjoy, right? But sometimes when you're doing that, when you're promoting your own music as an independent artist, like we both are, it can feel like how am I going to provide value to another person? Like I'm just another person trying to get them to listen to what I have to say. I'm just another person on social media trying to take their attention from them, take their time away from them. And I think it's great when you can do something like this where you can offer value between another artist and share that with him. So thank you, man.
Wow. Well, no, thank you for saying that, because sometimes I still feel exactly what you said, even about this podcast. And I try to block that out and just be like, well, people are going to listen to it or they're not. It's no big deal, because at the end of the day, I enjoy what we're doing right now, the actual interview. The editing, not that fun. Doing the promoting on Instagram can be fun, but usually it can lead to a place where I'm like, oh, I wish it had, this thing had more followers, more likes, whatever. But this is really like, if I could focus on what we're doing right now, which is talking with each other, relating to each other when it comes to, bigger concepts and smaller things, that is really why I started it in the first place. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Please keep going. Please keep going. This is fantastic.
Oh yeah, I just and this is something I wish I had when I was younger that I could listen to, because like you said, when you were making Brothers and Fathers, or sorry, not Brothers and Fathers, your first EP with Nicholas, that you were green and there's a lot to learn at that point in your life, and there was a lot for me to learn when I was 18, 20, 21, and while it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, or it does seem like it was long ago, but it was only like, I'm 25 now, so it's not that far. But if I had known then where I would be now, if I just kept going, I probably would have started even earlier. But there's all these mental things that you deal with that keep you from starting or keeping going. And then you might hear something back that you really worked hard on and you don't think it hits as hard as it used to. Or you put something out that you're really excited about and like it just doesn't get the attention you were hoping for. And those things can set you back. But if I had something like this to listen to when I was younger, I think it would have given me a lot more hope, or at least perspective of what it really is like for artists that I look up to. Because, I love popular artists. I was a huge Coldplay fan. But I also loved smaller. Yeah, Coldplay is amazing. But I loved smaller artists too. And I held them in the same regard, I think. They were still like amazing artists to me that were so much better than me is what I was thinking at the time, right? And then doing something like this just really like made me realize we're all kind of in the same boat here. And I wish, like I said, I just keep going back to that. I wish I had this when I was a kid, which is why I really enjoy doing it now. And talking about this with you right now is great, because it just keeps reminding me that is why I'm doing it in the first place.
Awesome, man. I've learned, like, especially over the pandemic, like I've learned so much from podcasts. Like I've just like, it's inspiring to think like what you're talking about, like about a generation of kids growing up with resources to, there's so many podcasts on any topic that you could ever want to think about. And it's like, just me specifically, I play guitar And there's a couple like guitar podcasts, and I've like rediscovered really my passion for guitar that I had when I was like 15, and just learning about so many different things. There's music theory podcasts and all kinds of just random music nerdy stuff, and like it's just exciting. I know how much of a nerd I was with the resources I had when I was a teenager, which just is Wikipedia pretty much, and ultimateguitar.com, which was trash back in the day.
Was it?
I don't know if you like got started on ultimateguitar.com.
Oh yeah, of course. I still use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I teach music, and I use it like all the time for guitar students because it's great now, and they have the rating system, and you can see if something. When I started, dude, it was like, hey, Billy John, I just tabbed out this ZZ Top song completely wrong, and it's just the worst formatted tab. It's completely in the wrong key. And it was just, I remember like trying to learn a Beatles song off ultimateguitar.com when I was first starting. And it was just, I was like, I'm playing these notes on the guitar, and this just sounds terrible. But yeah, it's nice to think like of a generation of kids growing up with just more resources. And you already see, I feel like when you look at Instagram and you see like so many people like finding, I feel like I'm kind of talking about the guitar right now, but like just in general music, so many people finding and creating with whatever avenue it is, and really excelling at it at a young age. I think that's like so cool. And I wanted to say another thing about, because you mentioned things stopping you and like doubting, and it's so funny because like I was saying, I teach music, and I teach kids and I teach adults, and kids, like, they don't have that thing that they doubt themselves. And it's really fascinating. Like, I'll go through a lesson with a kid and they will play the most approximation of what is on the page. Like, just be super approximative about what was on the page, because they're learning. And they'll be, just really proud of themselves and want to move on to the next thing and just like don't think about it. And that's how I was when I learned guitar. I was just like going at this like bullet speed. And in contrast, I'll have adults, and we are so our own worst enemy when we're trying to make a goal, because that internal dialogue is just like, so much of what I do when I teach adults is like taking that dialogue out. And it's just like, it's crazy.
Wow. I also teach music. I started about 4 months ago, and I teach kids and adults, mostly kids, but a few adults. And that hit the nail on the head, because there's a lot of, I have one in particular. He's a great guy, but he's so hard on himself, and he's actually doing pretty good for starting guitar like a month ago or 2 months ago. And there are kids in contrast that they are killing it in their head. They think they are destroying it. And you have to be like, all right, well, let's take it back. That was really good. Good job, Johnny. But let's take it back. You didn't quite hit some of those notes.
You didn't quite hit any of those notes.
Any of them, yeah. But I do admire that confidence in them for sure. And if we could only tap into that, like just for a few minutes a day, it's amazing what I feel like we could get done. Because you're not always going to be confident, but if I could channel that for like 5 minutes a day, I would just do music for those 5 minutes and try to make the coolest shit ever.
Yeah, I feel like I would just do, like, I would get more done.
Yeah,
I literally feel like the critical side of things. It's actually fascinating the way U.S. and French people kind of approach critique, but like, the critical side of things slows me down. I feel like it makes me less efficient sometimes, because you just think too much. You overthink. Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to ask about your music videos, because I watched them yesterday, and the two I really, really loved, they're all great, but the two that I loved were Shadows and Real Man, which were both directed by David Nobles in Atlanta. And what's funny is I was like, I know that name, but I don't know why. So I looked him up, and we have a lot of mutual connections on Instagram with a lot of, because I am also an actor, so I know a good handful of actors and film people in Atlanta. One of them was actually a PA or a grip on your Real Man video, Jesse
No way.
Gallegos.
No way. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
Yes.
so I was like, oh shit, wow, small world. And he's the man, but it was just really cool to see how small the world it is. But that music video in particular, Real Man, I thought was awesome. I love the concept. I think all of the music videos in your newer releases, they're all relatively simple in concept, but you execute them perfectly. That makes it feel like start to finish like a really solid music video when all you're doing is like playing music or the dancing. I love the choreography in Real Man. How did you come up with that concept in particular? You know, you going back and forth with the girl and y'all are dressed the same.
Well, first of all, thank you. Yeah. So Real Man, I was a total like shot in the dark kind of adventure thing, and I cannot give enough praise to David, the director, because you know, when we started this album release, we knew we were going to release an album in 2020, but we knew like at like the end of 2019, so we didn't know about COVID. And so we'd been doing I'd been going over to Paris, and we'd shot like 2 music videos, and we were kind of still figuring out like how all this was going to look and how this was going to go. And then we, you know, of course COVID hits, and it kind of changed the whole plan. And it was one of those things where we were thinking COVID, you know, like everybody, we thought it was going to end in maybe June, and then it was like clear by September this was not going away. And so we wanted to put out Real Man. That was always planned as the 3rd single, and we had planned a music video. We'd like budgeted for it and everything, and I just didn't like. I'm kind of new in Atlanta. I've been here since 2018, which because of the pandemic feels new because I feel like there's like a year that's just gone, right? So I literally like cold emailed David, and I was like, hey, I see you're a music video director. I like your stuff. I want to see if you want to work with me on this. And I had like this scenario kind of vaguely written out, and I typed it up to him and sent him the song. And David, all along the way, was like, I told him, I was like, this is our budget, which was very modest. And he was just like, okay. And almost to the point, like I told him this, almost to the point where I was really, really nervous the day of shoot, because I was like, yo, is this guy like really going to be able to do this? Or is he just saying yes to me? And he's kind of, oh, well, you know,
It's like, yeah, we'll figure it out, I guess.
We'll figure it out. And if it doesn't look good, it's no skin off my back, you know, like kind of thing.
Right.
And he was absolutely not that. That was absolutely not the case. He just gets it done. Like he just really gets it done. So, we also had a choreographer, Olivia Rowe, and I got to shout out Courtney Walker, who was the lead dancer who played my doppelganger in that video. She learned that routine in 2 days. Olivia wrote the routine over several weeks and was just fantastic, completely transformed the idea in our head and put it onto a language that Courtney, who's a dancer at the Georgia Ballet, could interpret. So yeah, the concept just, you know, came through dialoguing with the song. The song is a lot about masculinity, toxic masculinity, and just some stuff that I kind of has been a part of my journey in life, and just growing up and stuff, and kind of trying to. I think like I wanted to write that song because at the time there was a lot of I was listening to a lot of female artists talk about feminist issues and talk about, particularly in France right now, there's a big they're kind of having like their own Me Too sort of movement, and I was kind of noticing that like guys were being quiet about it in their music in a way that women weren't. And I was like, well, not to say that I'm the only one who, I don't want to sound like I'm the only male artist who ever talked about this or anything. It's not what I'm trying to say. But like, I was just like, I feel like we're the problem, and I feel like we're not talking about it, that they're talking about us. You know what I mean? And I was like, well, I need to like look at myself. And I didn't want to just critique someone else. I feel like it's always best if you can critique yourself, if you can aim. I don't know. That's like the way I want to live my life. Is I don't want to be a critic, an exterior critic of the ether. Like I don't want to like go out into the zeitgeist and be like, toxic masculinity bad, let's change. I feel like there's enough of that. I feel like rather like let's get down. At least my intention and my hope for the song was to look at the insidious toxic masculinity within myself and think about how I could have contributed to things, and think about how I can, because I think ultimately, like, the kind of the thing that I grew up around, sorry, I know I'm kind of getting into the weeds here, but the thing that I grew up around was a lot of like stoic, keep it to yourself kind of bullshit, suffer in silence kind of a mentality. And the problem with that is that all you're doing is you're internalizing things, and then it's gonna boil over, because as a man, you're taught that you can boil over. We're given permission to express our emotions. In contrast to what a lot of people say, like we are given license to express our emotion. We just are allowed to be angry. We kind of teach boys that they're allowed to be angry, and we kind of give them permission to be violent, really. And I was just thinking about how, like, I'm someone who I really wish I could cry more. I'm not a crier. I really wish I could. And I think my response to stress is anger, which is so terrible. Like, crying is so much of a better response to anger, because you're literally releasing, and you're sending a signal to another human that you're suffering. And when like, think about when you see someone cry, you mostly have empathy for them. Your immediate response is to de-escalate and to empathize. But if you see someone angry, it just makes you angry. It doesn't fix anything. And so I don't know. I feel like I got kind of into the weeds about what the song was about. But yeah, that's kind of where everything comes from. And I thought it would be interesting to have this duality where you weren't sure who was the real man in that scenario. And also wanted to talk a little bit about how gender is a little bit performative.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate you sharing all that. You weren't going into the weeds at all. Sometimes it takes longer to express how you're feeling, because you start and then you're like, well, this, that, and then you realize you're like, wow, there's so much more to it than even maybe originally. No. Please,
yeah,
no.
I'm such a verbal processor
Yeah.
too. Like that, yeah.
Well, we're on a podcast, so it makes sense that we're talking for a long time, But yeah, I think what you really said that hit the nail on the head for me was the idea of critiquing more of the self instead of the exterior, because I feel like we live in a society where it's very, very easy to point the finger and accuse X, Y, and Z of why the world is bad or why things aren't better than they could be. But that old classic saying, be the change you want to see in the world, I think is so real. But we're not really rewarded for that, I don't think, because it's such an internal process that you have to go through on an individual level. And if you just call out things and say, that's this, that's that, do better, you're like rewarded for that more than I think you are rewarded for doing the personal work. And it's also not immediate either. That takes a long
That's
time.
what I was gonna say. It's because it all goes down to instant gratification. Like when you can denounce swiftly, and bring swift justice, there's that instant gratification factor. Whereas if you can slow down and be introspective and really integrate change, there's no metric for that. There's no like retweet, follow, like
Right.
thing for that. Like no one's like, hey, you've really improved at being more vulnerable and trying to be less of a piece of shit. Like like it's like what I mean. Like
Totally.
No one. It's hard to portray that to the world, and I don't think the world. You have to ultimately decide that it's best for you, and you have to remove that expectation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're doing it for the gram, so to say, like if you're like trying to do self-improvement for the gram, like it's like, well, that's not going to work, because that's the wrong metric.
Right. You're already starting on shaky ground by worrying about what the social medias are going to say or how they're going to react to your very real or hopefully very real personal work is going. But it's so hard to actually want to follow through with that. Like, you want to, but when you aren't getting that gratification, it's hard to know if you're really doing it right or not, which kind of goes back to the whole patience thing we were talking about. You hear about 18-year-olds becoming these huge pop stars, and you're like, I've been working on this for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and like, where's that for me? But we're not all on the same road, and if you can just have the patience to work on yourself, work on, your situations in your life to become a better person, a better artist, eventually those things will come to you in a way that will feel more gratifying to you, because it's the way you did it, instead of trying to get that approval or validation from external sources that don't really even matter to you. You just think they do because it's that dopamine hit.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. The yeah. I mean, this stuff was made by people who understand neuroscience. This stuff was made by people who understand like what gives us exactly what you said, like the dopamine hit. And I think, hopefully artists are, and I always I don't like to say artists are, I'm always wary of like portraying artists as these special people, because it's really not the goal. But like, hopefully artists are looking for something a little bit more real, and it's like love, same thing. It's like love, it's like sex, it's like food, it's like anything. It's when you can appreciate it and when you can savor something, that's when you're going to be ready for it, and that's when you're going to enjoy it. And there's no sense in, and even there's almost no sense in doing it if you're not going to be able to savor it.
That's so true. It is savoring it that makes it feel so much better, like making it last and being in the now, appreciating the moment that you're in right now, instead of worrying about what's the next thing, like what's the next hit gonna be. I want to finish off this first section of the interview by asking, you've been doing this for a good while now. You've had a lot of live performances under your belt. You've released a good handful of projects at this point. What would you say was one of the biggest pieces of advice you would give to aspiring artists now? Or you could even think about it like, what would you go back and tell yourself at 18 years old?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I would subscribe to Parker Wheeling's On That Note podcast, and I would make sure that you hit the bell, and I'd make sure that you get all notifications and updates and follow.
That's a great answer. Let's just end it right there.
Let's just end it right there. I mean, seriously, I would say that. But then I think, I think we've actually already touched on it. And it's just keep going. There's like this hilarious origin story. So like this kind of iteration of my career that I'm in right now, I'll be really brief because I know I've given a lot of anecdotes. But Mathieu, who used to play in a band called Her that I used to tour with, he and I have kind of embarked on this era of my career together. He's kind of my right-hand man. And it actually started on a trip. We went to LA together to play a show. And we wanted to like make music. We were like rented an Airbnb, and we were like in LA. We're like, yeah, let's like make music in LA, dude. It's kind of like a little adventure as well. And this Uber driver was like asking us about like what we were doing and stuff. And we were kind of like at first not really sure how to take him. And turns out this guy's an Uber driver, but he's like done way more stuff than we've ever done. Like he's just a super badass like bass player. He was in like the Japanese music scene for years and was playing with all these huge acts and toured all over the world. And he's just like in his 60s and he's retired and he does Uber for fun. And he told us like, guys, stick to it. Like stick to it. And he just kept saying it over and over again. He's like, and it was so beautiful because like he had like children. He was married. He was still married to the love of his life. And he was like, he was like in retirement age, basically. He was like, being a musician is the best life you can offer yourself. He was like, I don't have any regrets. He was like, just keep going. And Matthew and I were looking at each other and we were just like, oh my God, this is amazing. I think we like actually recorded him because it was just so inspiring. So, yeah, I'm sorry. It was a long anecdote, but yeah, that's the best advice I've ever gotten. And I've got it twice now. So I'm really lucky, but it's just keep doing, keep, believe in yourself and keep going. And it doesn't matter what the results are. It's so cliche, but it's about the friends you make along the way. It's about the journey.
Dude, the cliches, they're cliches for a reason.
They're cliches for a reason.
They make sense and they stick around for so long because they're true. That is a really cool story. I like that. So that's going to take us over to the last 5, where I'm just going to ask you 5 questions and we'll be out. All right, number 1 is in the studio or playing live?
Oh, man. Right now, I want to say live because it's been so long, but I know that the answer is studio. The studio is really where it happens. The studio is fun. Yeah.
So is there a different energy you get in the studio versus playing live?
Yeah, I think like the studio is where I can just go into the same person I was when I was a little boy. I grew up in, like I said, on a farm in the middle of the woods, really solitary, and had a lot of just introspective time and twisting the knobs on a synth or adding some tape echo to a vocal and really or just writing and figuring out the structure of a song and making something come to life and making something new is just extremely rewarding. And we were talking about dopamine, and I think like making a new song, like that's the best feeling on earth. I love that feeling. So as much as I love like the energy of a crowd, I really, really do love the energy of a crowd, and I love it when you just feel like you're on top of the world. I really love the feeling of making something new.
I totally agree. It's so rewarding to like sit back after a long day in the studio or days in the studio, and then you're like, wow, this is something that I made. Like, I would listen to this if this was something that anyone else made. And to like put your stamp on it is crazy. And then on the other side of that coin, even though it feels like it is yours, there's always part of you that's like, I think I just stole that from the ether. Like, that doesn't feel like I wrote that.
That just dropped in. Yeah, that was like, I just had my net out and it just happened to catch one. Yeah.
Yeah. I always think about it like a radio antenna. You just like tune into this thing that's in the universe, and like you never know what you're gonna catch. Sometimes you catch something that's like, sometimes you catch nothing. Sometimes you catch something that you're like, oh, it's kind of cool, but you never really do anything with it. And then sometimes you catch like the big fish that is like something you're so proud of.
That's the best.
Question number 2 is, what do you think is a perfect album front to back?
D'Angelo, Voodoo.
That you're like the 3rd or 4th person to say D'Angelo's Voodoo.
Yeah, it's really good. Also, I mean, if you want like 1 or 2 more, like Harvest, Neil Young, I think it's really good. There's like one skip on that one. I won't say which one, but there's a skip on that one. I really like Neil Young. Abbey Road. Abbey Road, man. Abbey
Classic.
Road. Yeah.
That used to be my favorite, but it's so daunting to me now. Like, I can't listen to the whole, well, I can, but it's hard to make myself listen to the whole thing because it's just like such an epic album. Now I'd say Revolver is my personal favorite by them.
Yeah, I like those too. It's like the Revolver's more approachable for sure. It's like there's so many individual like really good sound. I mean, there's so many good sounds on Abbey Road. Hold on, whoa. But there's like there's great guitar sounds on Revolver too.
100%. Question number 3 is, who's your dream artist or producer to work with?
I really like what Mark Ronson does with everybody he works with. I think like he's really great because he can be a chameleon. Like, you don't necessarily know it's Mark Ronson, but then when you tell someone it's Mark Ronson, you're like, okay, I can tell that Mark Ronson worked on that. And one of my favorite artists is Rufus Wainwright, and they did a record together, and it took for me where I think Rufus's sound needed to go for that record. And I think he's one of the coolest guys. I think it'd be really, really great to work with him.
I'm just now starting to listen to interviews with him and kind of get into him as like his perspective as a producer, like I started listening to an interview he did with Zane Lowe, and if you haven't heard it, you should check it out. It's really cool. He's just like, it's got such an interesting perspective, I think, and his accent is funny to me.
Yeah, it's like lost in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like British, but not really, like not a British accent I've ever heard. It's funny. But yeah, really, really smart guy. So I'm trying to get a little bit more into him. I heard he's got this show on, I think, Apple TV.
Yes, I want to watch that so bad.
It sounds really cool, going over like reverb or delay, distortion, drum machines. It just sounds like some stuff I would really nerd out about.
I want to watch that with my wife because my wife always makes fun of me because I'm a huge nerd for gear, and she is she just makes fun of the way I talk about these inanimate objects, and I want to watch it and be like, see, this is what reverb is.
And she'll still probably be like, yeah, that's kind of cool.
Like, you're still a huge nerd.
Still a big old nerd over here.
Yeah.
Question 4 is, what's on your musical rotation right now?
So I was listening to, like I said, the Phineas record, but I was just so happened to be listening to that. I love the new Yebba record, that Yebba.
Oh yeah,
album.
someone just told me about that too.
Yeah,
It might have been Ryan. I can't remember.
Ryan is the guy to ask. So I don't know. I'm not like the hippest guy when it comes to like music. Ryan is the hippest guy I know. Like if he
Shout
knows
out to
about
Ryan
it.
Egan.
Shout out to Ryan Egan, y'all. Y'all need to stream weeknights.
Yes.
And he's amazing. And he's the reason I'm here again. And I would say Neil Young too. Neil Young is like, I've just I don't know, like he's been listening to like 60s and 70s folk a lot more, like really been getting into I've never like really dug into Bob Dylan's career.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, I'd always known quite a bit of Bob Dylan, but like now I'm like really listening to Bob Dylan in it. So yeah, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, kind of that Joni Mitchell, that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. I don't want to say I guess I recently got into Bob Dylan, but even that's kind of generous. I used to like not care at all, but now I have a good place to start. I think it's called In the Morning or Morning something. I don't know. Clearly you can tell I'm not super into him, but
dude,
I do.
If there's any Bob Dylan fans listening, I'm not like, I don't know everything either.
Right. Well, even Bob Dylan fans can't keep up. They have there's such a dense discography.
Such a long career.
Yeah. Which I did watch a documentary with Kevin Basco, who produced Weeknights and that whole album. Because he produced my new EP that will be out probably in 2022. So that was kind of a funny connection right there. But we watched a Bob Dylan documentary, and it gave me a bigger appreciation for who he is and like what he was doing in the 60s and early 70s that was so out there and wild that if people did it today, people would still be really kind of confused, or it would just be controversial in a way. But like, I just really appreciated watching that and being like, oh wow, this guy's like an artist's artist.
That's a good way to put it. Artist. Yeah. And I feel like for a long time I had the popular culture idea of Bob Dylan of like, hey man, I talk like this right here.
Right. Yeah.
And that's like, when you really, I don't know, it's kind of unfortunate because that's not really who Bob Dylan is, I feel like. I mean,
yeah, there's clearly so much more. So the last question here is, I may have gone out on a limb asking you this, but I think you mentioned in an interview that you really like him. And I always love asking this. Frank Ocean, Channel Orange or Blonde?
So that's really, really hard. Frank Ocean is one of my favorite artists. Lucky enough to I saw him live in 2017. That was
where?
Freaking amazing. In Sweden.
Oh, okay.
At the No Way. Oh, you forgot the name of the festival. No Way Out or whatever. That's not the name of the festival. It's not the name. I can't remember what it's called. But it was amazing, man. He had Spike Jonze on the stage
so cool
with him filming, and it was really, really cool. And his voice was perfect live, and it was just very Frank Ocean, the whole experience. But I really like Channel Orange when that record came out, when I found it, I was like, I hadn't felt that way. Like when I was younger, Continuum from John Mayer came out. That was a big deal for me. And I think Channel Orange was like the next big deal for me, like that, in a way that like it profoundly shaped my music in a way that I'll never get rid of, you know? And I think as much as I love Blonde, and I think Blonde maybe from a critical perspective is like the better album, I'm going to have to go with Channel Orange, because Channel Orange was just so, I've put so much mileage into that record, and there is still so much of what makes Blonde great already there. And also, like, when you read about like how he made that record and how quickly he wrote those songs, and like he wrote them all in like a very like quick succession, then worked on them for months, close to years. And I still, I feel like Blonde has superseded Channel Orange in the zeitgeist, but I'm like, Channel Orange is still really, really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I won't fault anybody for answering either or. I'm personally more of a Blonde guy myself, just because what you said, putting so much mileage into it. I do kind of feel like I've done that with Blonde at this point. I rarely go back and listen to Channel Orange, even though it's obviously an amazing album. But to me, Blonde just feels like, it doesn't even feel like an album. It feels like a lifetime. And that sounds maybe so pretentious, but it really just feels like you're like, I mean, and he's obviously being very intimate on the first album as well. But, and maybe some of it was living in LA when it came out. Like, it was like a year into living in LA, and it just kind of came out at the right time for me. And it just felt like I talked with another guest, Fulton Lee, about this exact question, and he said something that I totally identify with, which was Channel Orange feels like it was created by a really, really talented man, but Blonde feels like it was created by God and just dropped onto this earth, and it like could have dropped at any time in history and it would still be as amazing as it is. And that is obviously like such a ridiculous comparison, but to me that's how it feels.
Man, it's hard to argue with, because I mean, like, just like the personnel on Blonde is crazy. Like the work that James Blake does on that record is just freaking out of this world. There's like a avant-garde like composer who does like some synth stuff. The guys from Blood Orange are involved on a lot of that stuff. Like it's Blonde is like probably a superior record, but hey man, it's God's first album.
That's true.
And we could give the hipster answer and say Nostalgia Ultra.
Oh yeah, that's true. I asked somebody that question, Pedazo de Carne con Ojo. Everybody should check him out if you haven't yet. But he said Endless.
Yeah, that's the really hipster answer.
That's the really hipster answer for sure.
That's the IPA answer.
The IPA answer, yeah. And look, great album. He had a good comparison, I think, which was, if Blonde is the Sistine Chapel, Endless is like the sketches of it, the blueprints of it. And that's why he loves it. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting point.
Wow. Just because of that quote, we have to listen to his music. That is amazing.
Yeah, and I have that album.
I want to hear that, guys.
In my car, I found like a bootleg CD of it, and it's like in my CD changer right now. I finally changed it out because I talked to someone recently about it. I'm like, yeah, I should listen to that again. And it's amazing, but it does feel like the version 1 of Blonde for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's our time here, Desmond. I appreciate you coming on and getting lost with me, talking about so many different things, hitting so many different areas of conversation with artistry and creativity and advice you have for other up-and-coming artists. It really was a pleasure getting to know you and talking about your new album, Shadowdancer, which everyone needs to go check out. It's really great, super funky, awesome tunes, the vocals, chef's kiss, so good. Everyone needs to go listen to it. And shout out to Ryan Egan one more time for connecting us. We need to go hang out now that you're in Atlanta before you
Absolutely.
go to Paris or after you come back.
Absolutely. I was just gonna say, let's get a beer, man.
Let's do it.
We'll chat off camera about where you're located and stuff.
Yeah, we'll get an IPA and listen to Endless.
Exactly. There's definitely places in Atlanta where we could do that.
I'm sure there are. But yeah, thank you again, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Parker, seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Of course, dude. All right, man. I'll talk to you later. Have a great day. See ya. Bye.
I'm playing with fire.
Thank you again for joining me for another episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. If you haven't yet, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and you can even leave a comment down below to let me know who you're listening to. On that note, I'll see you guys next time.
The castle's made of sand will hold, but life